Hey, I'm Matt Geiger. My goal is to get you the full story, not the liberal story and not the conservative story, and that's why I'm here to look at all the facts and give a moderate's opinion on low-income housing policy. I think everybody should have access to housing they can afford, and for that I'm happy with the commonly accepted threshold of 30% of income spent on housing or less. There's a really simple reason that there's not enough low-income housing right now. It's because right now, it doesn't make financial sense to build low-income housing. There are people at all income levels, so clearly there's going to be some level at which, no matter what you do, government assistance is going to be necessary if you want 100% housing. So the key is to first figure out the best way to help the market cover as many people as possible, and then as a second step, figure out the best way the government can help those people that the market simply will never be able to provide for. Let's just start by considering what I think is the simplest solution, which would just be to expand what we already have. If it's not broken, why fix it, right? Well, in our case, it is broken. The federal government provides Section 8 housing vouchers that cover any rent beyond 30% of a person's income. But right now we have a situation where only 1 in 4 people who qualify for housing vouchers can actually get them because the federal government offers a set amount of funding each year, regardless of how many people qualify. On top of that, the government offers programs that subsidize developers to build low-income apartments, the idea being that helping the market work by subsidizing debt and construction costs will allow them to make a profit building low-income housing. So let's say that we just quadruple our spending on Section 8 vouchers. Would that solve the problem? Well, no. Because right now, even a lot of those who get housing vouchers can't use them because individual landlords don't want to accept Section 8. That's either because landlords want to avoid the regular inspections required for those who accept Section 8 recipients, or they don't like the additional language required in leases with Section 8 recipients, or they believe that voucher tenants are more likely to not take care of their property. So you'd also need to significantly increase what we give to developers to build more properties so that the Section 8 supply met the demand. So expanding the current policy is just a massive investment, so I don't really see more money alone as a viable answer to our problem. But maybe we could couple this with something else. One of the significant areas for change is in zoning requirements. It depends a lot on the city we're talking about, but almost all cities set building height limits, unit limits, permit requirements, parking lot availability requirements, historic preservation districts, minimum unit size requirements, and these things all get in the way of creating buildings that are more cost efficient for the developer and therefore cheaper for the tenants. Some of these things are useful, preserving the character of a specific neighborhood, for example, but in general, these regulations have just really gotten out of control. Policies like these act to make land and housing scarce, driving up prices and preventing mobility, whether to move where jobs are located or to move somewhere to give your kids a better education and a safer environment. Individual cities need to look carefully at their zoning laws and understand the impact they have. Often these regulations are specifically meant to keep out poor people and minorities. Most of the time, cosmetic conveniences aren't worth the very literal high price we pay as a result of the form of increased land scarcity, and therefore more expensive rents. But as I said earlier, there's going to be a point that landlords can no longer offer affordable rent to the poorest of the poor, regardless of what we do with zoning laws. That's why a housing voucher is going to be necessary. The problem with the vouchers now, though, is that they remove all power from the tenant and they distort the tenant-landlord relationship. First off, to give Section 8 tenants the same bargaining power as any other tenant, we need to remove that special lease addendum requirement from the Section 8 vouchers and let the tenant get approved as any normal tenant would, and let the tenant find an apartment as any normal tenant would. On top of that, restrict landlords from discriminating against Section 8 eligibility. This makes a Section 8 tenant just like any other normal tenant. It only serves as another roadblock to landlords accepting poor people. If there are truly egregious property circumstances, states can just pass laws against those for all tenants, not just Section 8. At the same time, we need to reestablish the normal market forces that apply to any other tenant while still preserving a meaningful voucher amount. Right now, if somebody gets a Section 8 voucher, they have an incentive to find the absolute nicest, most expensive rental property that'll accept Section 8 because the Section 8 tenant pays 30% of their income regardless. We need to set the voucher to an amount based on income of the tenant and location. So that way, a Section 8 tenant can shop around for apartments and also has an incentive to look at prices, amenities, location, and everything else that goes into renting an apartment, just like anybody else does. And they're rewarded if they spend less by having to pay less out of pocket. This also encourages people to live together where it makes sense to make their money go further so that they could buy a nicer place when they combine their credits. And that carries with it the incentive to keep families together. When we're relying on the market in any industry, we need to make sure that government actions don't violate the integrity of the buyer-seller relationship, or we'll end up with an assortment of unintended consequences. So that might prompt some people to ask, well, why don't we just remove the market from the equation and provide public housing for those who can't afford it? The problem is that we've tried this, and we ended up with the projects. And just in general, when we can rely on the power of market forces to solve a problem, history has told us that we should. And when there are failures in the market forces, like providing houses for even the poorest, we need to create subsidies that at least attempt to mimic the effect of the market while still helping people. So just to summarize, I think the low-hanging fruit in affordable housing is cutting regulations, specifically building height requirements, parking space requirements, zoning specifications, and requirements on number and minimum size of units. These laws are usually prejudicial policies pretending to improve neighborhood cosmetics. After that, the next best alternative is going to be to offer a housing voucher until all people have housing, but with the caveat that the voucher offers flexibility that the current vouchers don't offer. And that way we leave the market intact so that people have the most choice as to where and how they want to live versus relying on the kindliness of landlords or the lucky chance of finding Section 8 housing outside of the most dangerous neighborhoods. These policies won't be cheap, but among domestic issues, there's nothing more important, in my opinion, than helping people obtain basic necessities just like housing. Thanks for watching.